Recorded at the Kitchen Studios. This is the Pencil Pushers Podcast.
Welcome, Leadheads, to the Pencil Pushers Podcast. I'm your humble host, Mike Rosado, and I'm doing something a little different for you this episode. I'm going to share my thoughts on the power of accepting creative challenges that will help with productivity and personal growth. Now, this is truly a conversation starter that will hopefully spark future talks on how to push through fear of failure, judgment, or straight up rejection. Definitely a common thread we all have at some time or another as artists and humans. So sit back, relax, and let's get right into it. All right, folks, thanks so much for joining us. This is episode 11 of the Pencil Pushers Podcast. I just recently got back from vacation, and it's given me some time to reflect a little bit more, as vacations hopefully sometimes will do for you. But firstly, what I do want to say is thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I know that it's probably commonplace to say that you could choose any podcast, you can choose any media to listen to spend your time listening to. But it's really true. I do know that. I love listening to podcasts, but I'm certainly loyal to a select few. And I look forward to those every time they come out. I realize that your time is precious. Everybody's super busy trying to reach their goals and just have a regular life. We've seen a lot of great uptick every month since we've started, which has not been that long. We just started sometime in March or April of 2019, and here we are in very beginning of August. Every month, our listenership is practically doubling. So that is awesome news, and I can't thank you guys enough. So big thank you. And please do not hesitate to send me a line if you have a guest that you think would be awesome to have with on the Pencil Pushers Podcast, or if you have any suggestions or just general comments or just want to say hi. That is greatly appreciated. So most of you guys don't really know who I am. My close circle of friends who listen to this podcast certainly do. But I think maybe at the intro of this, I should probably tell you a little bit about myself. And then maybe it'll give us some framework for the topic I think would be interesting to talk about today. I'm a designer. I'm an artist. I'm a drummer. I've been drumming for 25 years or so. It is another one of my great passions, and I love doing it. It's basically my second passion. In fact, I think I toggle between the visual arts and drumming on a regular basis as to which one I love more. It's obvious that people in this field tend to have a musical side to them as well, so this is nothing unique, obviously, but it's great to have both. So as I said, I'm also a graphic designer. I own a branding agency, a small branding agency in downtown Raleigh called MRC, and you can find us at mrcraleigh.com. We do awesome work. I love what we do, and we're doing really great work as of late. We're doing some really cool projects. So find us on Instagram at mrcraleigh, and obviously you can find us online at mrcraleigh.com. So I hope you come and visit and say hi. You know, I started this branding agency about 10 years ago, and it was born out of my desire to create my own path. This has been a sort of a common thread for me since I was a teenager. And I think in the art world, this is pretty commonplace as well. Most artists have a rebellious side to them. I mean, they're already, for the most part, going against the grain, because most people, at least this is the case for, hundreds of years, most people who think about artists, they admire them, they adore them, they pay lots of money to participate in the art that they actually produce. But when it comes to being an artist or having one in your family, it's a novelty, and it's certainly not something that your parents typically would want you to become, unless you have really cool parents. Most of the time, you're going to have parents and family members that are going to push you into something that is the exact opposite of artist, because we've been dealing with this idea of the starving artist myth, which has been pervasive throughout millennia, I would imagine. But for you to become an artist, you typically will be somebody who has a rebellious side. You have a passion that you're excited about, and you continue to do it despite what people might think about this path, especially when you decide that, you know what, this is something I want to be as a career. And so this rebellious side, I think, is one of the reasons why I felt like my life has been so fulfilling in a number of ways. Now, the topic I want to talk about is called, I've titled it, quote unquote, Accept the Challenge. And the reason I feel like this is such an important topic is because although artists are unique in the sense that not everyone is one, and we all have our own styles, of course, the truth of the matter is that we all have passions and dreams that we've hoped to achieve, and many times that starts with when you're a child, a small kid dreaming of being a doctor or an actor or an artist or whatever it might be. But it also happens throughout your entire life. You have dreams of doing not just a career, but it could be just, I have a dream of going to Fiji one day. And, or, you know, getting involved in politics or social work or getting involved in saving the rainforest. It could be whatever it is, right? These are ambitions and dreams that people have that spark in their mind and might be something that's pervasive over decades of their life. And one thing that I've noticed in my life, I am a Sagittarius. I guess that does have something to do with it. We tend to be people who love adventure and trying new things. And so that's certainly a common thread that might not necessarily be, you know, but the reality is that when you see and talk to people who are of a particular sign, they pretty much match at least 70% of what the sign says that they are supposed to have traits and attributes of. So I'm just going by that. So I'm a Sagittarius, so my normal personality is to be on the adventurous side, and that means that I'm probably going to be a little bit rebellious of what is commonly acceptable, I guess you could say. And what I mean is that there's typically a common feeling of, okay, status quo, this is what you should do, and Sagittarius or adventurous people tend to skip over that line a little bit. So I already have that innate part in me. I tend to try something I'm excited about and worry about getting in trouble or worry about failure afterwards. Now, of course, it doesn't remove me totally from being subject to these kinds of fears of failure, judgment, or rejection, but I'm easily inspired, and that makes it easier for me to try new things. And I guess when I say accept the challenge, really what I'm saying is that be willing to try new things, you know. If I were to inspire anybody to do anything, was to just be a little bit more adventurous in your life every day. And there's so many benefits to that. Now, over the past year or so, I've had many opportunities to do some risky things that were risky to me personally. And this is what I'm trying to address. I'm not trying to say that what is risky to me is going to be risky to you. But there is a common thread. We're all human beings. We all have different fears and things that we're hesitant about because we're afraid of failure, rejection, or judgment. So for me personally, I am adventuresome, but I also have this very self-reflective side. And since I've been on vacation for the past week, I've spent more time thinking about these really cool things that I've done over the past year. So to give you a couple of examples, number one, I started a podcast. I never thought about starting a podcast up until maybe about, 6 to 8 months ago. And it was something that I thought might be good for the general community. In other words, I thought it might have some value for people like myself. I didn't necessarily think that, I didn't have any delusions of grandeur that I wanted to be famous for being some sort of podcast host. I mean, that just seems silly to me. I really did want to do it as a way to participate in my community, in the arts community. But I didn't want to do it unless I had a real passion for whatever the subject was. And I realized that I love the hand-drawn arts as a whole. I'm an illustrator, I love animation, I love comic book art, I love hand lettering. I'm just really passionate about that. I think there's something beautiful, there's something kinetic, there's something very human about that. And so I found something that I thought would be of value as I looked around, did some searches, and couldn't really find anything that had that specific topic in mind. So I had this sort of hope that I could bring some value for everybody else. The other part is that I felt like on a personal level, one of the other parts about me is I am very self-reflective. I love to learn how to be a better person, a better me. And I think a lot of times I believe that humans are covered in fears that have been impressed upon us by our parents, society, etc. And so we lose the real me, the real you. We lose ourselves because it's covered in all of these demands of what you shouldn't do, what's wrong, what is deemed wrong or not right. And so we lose a part of ourselves. And so for me, I felt like throughout my life, even my early teens, I've always wanted to discover more about who I was and my potential of being a good person, of contributing, doing positive things for society, whether that was just being good to the person next to me or maybe having an impact to somebody even across the world. Again, this has had nothing to do with delusions of grandeur. It was just something that I felt was important for our world, was to be a good person, to help. And I saw the logical reasons as to why that was important. As a part of that, having this podcast was a great outlet for me. But I also had a lot of insecurities about how I would be perceived by people who didn't know me. Sounds strange, but it's true. That's the kind of fear I had. The other thing is that I was afraid of how my friends would see. What if I sounded like an idiot? You know, what if I couldn't make very good points? What if I was speaking to the person who I invited to come and speak with, thought that I was an idiot? And then it would make me feel insecure, and then I wouldn't be able to perform well in the interview, and then that would show on the podcast for the people who were listening. So I saw that this was something that was going to be a challenge for me. And rather than letting that sit inside me and stop me from doing the podcast, I saw it as a learning experience. I saw it as a way for me to grow and learn, hopefully be an example once I came out of it. Once I went through that journey of kind of facing my fears and then coming out of it and saying, wow, it wasn't so bad. And then I could share that with whoever I was in contact with, and maybe that would inspire them to do the same thing. So that I felt like there were a lot of really awesome benefits to that. I was going to learn some things, and then I would be able to impart maybe my own advice and wisdom that I got out of it to help somebody else do the same. Not necessarily to start a podcast, but just as a living example of Exhibit A, this is how you face your fears to get past in order to do something that you think might be of value to yourself and also to others. I think that it's really important that when you're thinking about these kinds of things, when you start having any kind of hesitation, that if you learn to love the process, it makes things so much easier. Most of the time, I think people dread what they think might be the outcome. And it stops people from actually moving forward because they fear every part of it. And it stops them from doing it. And what I'd like to suggest is that if you learn to just kind of change your mind about how you're perceiving the actual process of doing it, and that includes like finishing whatever project or challenge that you have, and then having a chance to look back and reflect on it and see what you learned. You know, if you changed your perception of it, it really does make the process not only easier, but more fun. And that's the whole point. I mean, that is just a huge part of your progress as a person, and it makes you be more of an inspiration, I feel, to others. You know, there's a guy named Wayne Dyer. He was sort of a modern philosopher. He passed away a few years ago, and he had this awesome quote. And I'm not sure if he wrote it or came up with it, but he used to always say it. And the quote was, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." And I thought that was so good. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So it really is all about perception. So if you have something that you want to do but you're afraid of, look at it differently. Try to find a different perspective that makes it more positive, rather than being focused on the cloud of whatever it is you're afraid might happen. I think what an acronym that's been put out there for fear is false expectations appearing real. And if we can remember that most likely what you think will happen in a negative standpoint will most likely not happen. And there's some weird kind of psychology to that. And I don't completely understand it, but through my own experience, I see that that's actually truly the case. But the most important thing is to change your mindset and not be so worried about what you think might happen. And here's what has happened to me when I do that. When I change it to loving the process of learning more about myself as I go through the journey of accepting some sort of challenge from a creative standpoint or whatever. It doesn't even have to be creative. It could just be like a human experience challenge. My whole mindset changes, and I don't worry so much about what other people think. It's more about me and what I'm contributing for my own growth, and also maybe making other people feel good, feel happy, etc. It really is kind of a mental game, but I'm telling you, once you start loving the process, it actually makes things a lot easier. So when I looked back on starting this podcast and seeing the value that I would get out of it, anything that I was afraid of that might happen made it just minimized all of that. I started to think about, like, it's okay if I'm not perfect at the beginning. And if I keep being reflective and looking back and taking notes, then I would continue to get better. And that's kind of part of the value of doing what you're doing, you know? So if I'm starting a podcast, I would make sure that I actually remembered this. And it really did make a difference. So I just wanted to put that out there. I mean, and the cool thing is that this kind of feeling, right, does work for every single situation. Nothing is completely unique. I had to do, I was actually offered to do an art show. It's really interesting that I said I had to do. That's the fear mind going right there. But the reality is I was invited to do an art show for a place in downtown Raleigh. It's a really, really cool bar called Foundation. And it's been around for 10 years. It's, it's one of the coolest bars in downtown. It's a really, really nice spot. And they have been focusing on local artists the entire time. And so I was invited by the owners to present an art show. I quickly said yes, but then I also said, holy shit, silently. I'd never done a painting art show in my life. I did have about 3 or 4 months to kind of put things together. And so I definitely had my freak out moments, but I did keep in mind that I had had similar challenges like this. Now, granted, these are positive challenges, these are good things, and that's an amazing thing to have. But I followed the same process, even though the podcast is completely different than doing an art show. It really wasn't. I mean, I had to do my homework. I had to really spend time thinking about it. I had to do lots and lots of sketches. I had to think about what's my style going to be. Does it need to have a theme? I needed to make sure that it was going to, somewhat match what the bar looked like. I had all these thoughts to think about. And I had my peaks and valleys. I definitely had some freak out moments like, wow, I don't know if I can actually do this. Are people going to love it? Are they going to hate it? It was very, very emotional. It was an emotional roller coaster for me the entire time. But the cool thing is that I did wind up finishing it. And yes, there are times where I wish I could paint another painting and swap one out. You know, that's just the reality of it. I think every painter probably goes through that. But I went through the process. I had so many moments of just feeling elated to get paint on a canvas again, and actually felt honored that somebody asked me to do this. And I put a lot of love into it, you know. And, you know, some people are going to love it. Some people are not going to love it. And that's just the way art is. You can say there are going to be many people who say that about Picasso, too. So I am far from a Picasso, but I'm just saying even the greats have that same thing. The most important thing is that I focused on loving the process of actually doing it and making sure I was not losing track of that the entire time. And it made it fun. I felt like a kid just having that drawing in front of me, having those paints in front of me, and just expressing myself. And it was really, really cool. And it was another example for me to figure out how to really work through my fears of, again, you know, failure, judgment, and rejection. But I worked through it. I accepted the challenge. I worked through it. I prepared very hard, and I did the best that I could. Now, I automatically feel after I've put that up that I could do even better the next time around. And that is the whole point. It's almost like, and I'm sure you've heard this analogy before, it's very similar to going to the gym. You're never going to have that peak physical body that you maybe are hoping for if you're only sitting at home on the couch, maybe doing a couple of push-ups here and there a couple of times a week. It is like building a muscle. You have to do a little bit more every single day. Look back at the progress you've made, staying diligent, not being afraid or feel like you're never going to be able to accomplish it. You need to keep moving forward. And by accepting these challenges, you know, you will eventually get better at those fears you have. You'll start to those things will just start to subside. And I just think that there's so much value. And here's the thing too. As I've started to escalate saying yes to opportunities, to challenges, to creative challenges that have come my way, they start to increase. Like, I've gotten more opportunities now. It's given me more confidence. I feel happier. I feel more fulfilled. I feel more willing to take even grander challenges now. And what I feel has really helped me has been saying yes. That's really what my bottom line is here. Just continue to say yes. There are so many things that we think about that we dream we would like to do. Remember that. Think about all the times. Take note of all the things that you think, man, I wish I could do that. And if I could impress on you to just start saying yes, start stepping into the idea of what would it look like if I actually did that, right? And don't look at it as this miserable process, you know? Get excited about it. Get excited about the opportunity that might come your way. And I promise you, it will. Like, if you start stepping into what it is that you might think would be a cool idea, it will come to you. I'm telling you. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I'm nobody special. And for whatever reason, every time I try to step into something like this, it happens. And it will exponentially increase. This will happen to you more and more and more as you start to dig in. The other reality is that the truth is that this happens to us all the time. Whatever it is we focus on, it starts to come to you. So start putting that focus into things that pop into your head, like, wouldn't that be a cool idea? That would be fun to do. Wow, that would really be inspiring. Wow, nobody's doing that. Wow, I'd love to contribute to that. Step into those things and don't worry so much about failure. The only failure is, as Yoda says, is if you don't even try. Just do and reflect back. That's it. Just do, reflect back. Go back, turn around, and look at your process. Look at the progress. Look at what you did. Remember that. Take note, whether you got a journal or whatever, and start looking at what's the next thing. It is the thing that really will bring more happiness to your life. Because all of those ideas, all those dreams, all those ambitions that you feel since you were a kid and that you're feeling now, if you want to write that comic book, if you thought about doing that back when you were 14 years old and here you are 28, start writing it. Start thinking about it. Start researching. Just step into it. Accept the challenge that your mind has popped into you for a reason. So I guess that's pretty much it, you know? If I were to probably add one more thing, if you don't mind me saying, I would basically say, experiment with little challenges, okay? And get across that finish line and look back and start building up. Anyway, I don't know if this is helpful for you, but it's definitely been helpful for me. It's changed my life. I can't even explain it to you. People think I'm crazy who are friends with me. They're like, how do you do all these things? I'm like, well, I just love doing them. And I feel like it's helped me, again, not only creatively, but it's also helped me as a person. And if I can have the combo of those two things, my God, I'm going to continue to do that. So I guess that's about it, guys. I hope that you try it, and I'd love to hear your feedback. And if you step into that challenge and things worked out for you, let me know. If things didn't work out for you, let me know. I'd love to be in that conversation with you. So I'm rooting for you. Keep me posted, and I'll do the same. This is Mike Rosato from the Pencil Pushers Podcast, and I'm out.